In the morning when I leave my den, I moisturize with the tears of men. Stir my tea with a crucifix. I'm an ugly, nasty, call me bitch. In the evening when I'm on the rag, just rip up a couple of American flags. Take a nice hot bath in the blood of the rich. I'm an ugly, nasty, call me bitch. I try to think, but it hurts my brain, so I have an abortion and I find champagne. I'm a Jezebel, I'm a wicked witch. I'm an ugly, nasty, call me bitch. Weekends when I want some fun, castrate a man, take away his guns, drive a classic car into a ditch. I'm an ugly, nasty, call me bitch. Well, I know I am, but what are you? Some fascist bootlick Nazi tool, a whiny boy with a tiny dick, or a dumb fuck redneck backward hick. Did I get it right? Did I pay you yet? Maybe we don't know who we ain't met. Maybe nobody wins, but the already rich. If you're a dumb redneck and I'm a commie bitch.
Hey everyone, welcome to Go Ask Your Folks. I'm your host today, William Lenshare. Our guest is coming to us live from Hungary. This is my cousin, one of my favorite folks in the world, William Grow.
Hello, everybody.
It's good to see you again. It's been a while since we've talked, and
it has been a while, too long.
Yeah, I appreciate you very much being on our show today. So
absolutely happy to be here.
My cousin and I, we met when we were teenagers. Didn't know I had a cousin until I got shipped off across the country to Washington State to spend a summer with him and his brother.
Yeah, that was, shoot. It had to be about my 9th grade year, and I think you're ahead of me. So,
Right.
Yeah, if I remember right, that came about because of an airfare sale that my parents took advantage of, and we flew out to visit you in Reisterstown in Maryland.
Yeah. And then
we ended up getting along, and so they shipped you guys out for the entire summer.
It was great. It was fun. I had a great time getting to know you guys out there.
Yeah. It was, definitely changed the scenery. You know, Reisterstown was a lot bigger than the towns that we were living in at the time. I mean, imagine that must have been quite of a shock to you.
It was. We're not talking about a part of Washington that people might be familiar with. You know, we're not talking one of the cities. The closest city was
We're talking about the rolling plains of eastern Washington. We were, it started out by the Grand Coulee Dam, and the town that we were living in, Electric City, I mean, maybe had like 17, maybe 20,000 people in it.
Yeah,
and if that wasn't small enough.
Station.
Yeah. We had the Coville Reservation right there. And then we moved to an even smaller town on Lake Roosevelt called Seven Bays. And I think there was only a retirement community and like nobody our age out there. It was just like us and like our ATVs, and that was about it.
Yeah, I remember that moving process. We got to stay with you in 2 different places, if I recall correctly, when we were there.
Yeah.
Interesting, the dynamic. It was, both of them were culture shock, but there was really not much out there.
No, there really wasn't.
So you did mention that there were the tribal region in the area there. Your stepfather was a part of that?
Yeah, so he wasn't Coville. He was Alaskan Native from the Tlingit tribe. That's Tlingit. It's spelled different than we would expect to pronounce it. But we moved to Eastern Washington. So we were from the big city in Western Washington originally. I was born in Seattle. But if you go back to the 1990s, there was like the kind of the gang and crime wave. We had a lot of people coming up from California at the time. And stereotypically, these people brought, traffic and drug problems with them. And how true that is, I can't really say for sure because I was young. But my parents thought it was true enough to move out of all of that. And we quite literally plopped ourselves in what was like a $30,000 house. They had no jobs at the time. My father was in construction. My mom was an accountant. And the way it works, if you're going to work for the tribe, you need to have native preference. And my mother is ethnically white, but she, married to my stepdad, could claim that and ended up working for the Coville reservation. And what they did was they had a houseboat rental agency on Lake Roosevelt. It's a 122-mile long lake that you used to be able to rent houseboats and just kind of putt up and down and camp as you like. I don't think it was the most lucrative endeavor for the tribe to embark on, but it got us out there and it made the bills. So
as long as they got that done, that was the part that mattered to your family, right? I guess to you guys.
Yeah. And it was much different sense of community, moving out there from where we were near Seattle. I mean, when we were in Seattle, you might know the kids on your street, maybe one or two. But when you live out in a small population like that, you really know everybody. There's some big names in the tribe. It almost becomes like one gigantic family. And when you all get together, I mean, it's pretty fantastic. I've never seen anything like it before, ever. I mean, when we get together with the powwows, you see all your friends from school. You click up, you meet their families. Some of them are vendors at the powwow, some of them are dancers, but it all becomes interconnected. And you being a part of that is huge.
That's pretty great. I wish I had gotten a chance to see some of that when I was out there. That would have been pretty awesome. Mostly we just saw rocks.
yeah, you're not kidding. Yeah.
So there, you ended up going to school to study engineering, aviation.
Yeah. To get there, man, that's a long story. That's almost my life story.
I was gonna say there's a lot of years that we lost touch with each other. So
growing up, I was always able to get pretty good grades in school, and I think generally adults who knew me saw potential. They were always like, "Oh, you're going to do something. You're smart." They never had any doubt. But if I can point out a failing of those adults, so they never told me how to do anything. So they would say, fifth grade, what do you want to do when you grow up? Oh man, I just saw Top Gun. I want to be a fighter pilot. And they say, oh, you need to get good grades to be a fighter pilot. And so I would study as well as I could and, get good grades. But as I got older, it dawned on me, it's like, I don't think I'm going to study history really well and have somebody plop me in the cockpit of a fighter aircraft. Like there seems to be a disconnect. And so with that, when I graduated high school, I really had no direction because I didn't know the path to any future. So I kind of kicked around Renton, which is a bit south of Seattle and it's not the greatest neighborhoods in the whole world. I know I mentioned it last time, but the house that I was born in, there is now a jail built like right across the street. From that area to kind of give you an idea of like where I was living at the time. And I ended up down there and I ended up in the middle of like all the problems, at the age of like 18, having my own apartment, working at a car wash for tip money, I always had cash on hand. And I never minded it when like the high school seniors would skip school and come to my apartment, which was like right down the road from the high school. And it almost became like a flop house or a party house, which is how I got evicted from that apartment after about 4 months. And was essentially homeless. I didn't have any money saved up. I've been partying for first, last, and deposit on a new apartment. None of my friends, like I was the most successful out of all my friends. And so none of them had any, money to do anything with, and I couldn't count on them. And so if it wasn't for my dad finding out somehow and coming to get me in his truck and taking me to my grandmother's, I would have, quite literally been on the street. And I got to my grandmother's house and I told her, yeah, don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. I'm going to join the military or something and everything's going to be great. And I had no plans to do so, but it began to dawn on me. Eventually she was going to know that I wasn't leaving for the military. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Navy recruiter's office and I remember going in there and my grandparents or my grandfather on both sides of my family are both in the Navy. I told them as much. And he says, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I cooked in a restaurant once. I think I'd like to cook in the Navy. And he says, okay. He says, take this test. And it's the ASVAB. It's a pre-test for the ASVAB. And I took it, and it was like beyond easy. I handed it back to him, and he looked at my score. He says, yeah, we're not talking about cooking anymore. He took me down to the MEP station, and they said, you can be like a avionics technician, aircraft electrician, or jet propulsion mechanic. And I was like, yeah, but I just want to cook. They're like, you're not cooking. Like, you're going to do one of these 3 jobs. And I was like, all right, well, what are the bonuses? And, for the avionics technician, they said we'll give you $40,000 for college if you take the avionics technician. If you take the electrician, we'll give you like $3,000 in cash, and there's nothing for the propulsion mechanic. So I said, all right, well, I'll take the avionics technician. And that's how I actually got educated. It turns out in the military, if you do study really hard, they will plop your butt in the seat of a fighter aircraft, just as a technician, not as a pilot.
Just to work on the controls.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, for a person like me that had no direction, having an authority figure say, these are your three choices, you can make your own decision, but it's going to be one of these three paths, was just the boot in the butt I needed at the time to set my career. And I was able to do it. I did my 4 years in, I got out, and I made more than one attempt at university studies before I was successful. But I ended up having a good career to fall back on as I kind of struggled through university studies. That's kind of a different story in itself. But I always had an income. I was never in that homeless situation again. I always had some sort of savings or something to get me through. And I was able to turn my university studies and that career background, and I'm now an aerospace engineer. So that works out.
Excellent. But you did see, it's interesting that you got to see from such a young age how quickly, people can get into those situations. Like you said, if your father hadn't been there to pull you out of it, your grandmother.
It wasn't just then. So I mentioned university studies were a completely different story.
Yeah.
You see, I got the GI Bill and I got that bonus money from the Navy. And what they don't tell you a few things. One of them is they're going to pay that out over time. And the next thing is the money that they give you is good for about 3 years of university studies.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was doing my first year of university studies, I moved to Texas because when I joined the Navy, I left Washington State and then got stationed in Washington State. So I fell kind of back in with that old crowd that got me in trouble in the first place. I never really completely lost touch. So to kind of clean things up, I moved as far away as I could. And I had a friend moving to San Antonio and I followed him there. So the other thing they don't tell you is out-of-state tuition doubles an already expensive university cost.
Yeah, it does.
And now the GI Bill only covers half of that. So to get through my first year, I had to donate plasma twice a week. And I would get $20 on Tuesday and I would get $30 on Thursday. And that's how I got my gas money. While I was working full-time at a TGI Fridays as a busboy, which was really hard on me mentally, going from multi-million-dollar aircraft to bussing tables for $4 an hour plus tip out. And with the GI Bill, with the full-time job, and with me donating plasma, I had just enough to make it to finals my first semester. And I left for my first final at 4 o'clock in the morning, knowing I only had enough gas in my truck to make it halfway to school. And the truck died halfway there, and I started walking, and I got a ride from somebody. I remember thinking, if my truck gets towed, like from the side of the road, is on the side of, that's right. It. Like the other 3.5 years is done right there. I didn't have enough money to put $5 in the tank. I certainly don't have enough for a police impound. And you can see, like, if I don't have enough for day one of the police impound, then I sure don't have enough for day two or day three.
Right. And then it's gone.
Yeah, you take out a payday loan or something like that, then you're further in the hole. Like, I mean, it snowballs so quick.
That's happening to somebody who got the GI Bill and put in those years into the military to serve the country, and then you turn around and come out and it's still donating plasma just to get the education.
That was the biggest shock of my life about how expensive it was to be poor. Like, I learned more from that situation, I think, than I did in any of my 4 years of university studies. And it really is, because, you look at your options. You either go further in debt to get your vehicle back. That's your only means of transportation.
Yep.
Or you leave your vehicle there and you figure out a way to get to and from work, maybe public transportation, which was absolutely terrible in the area. We're looking at like hour-long commute times. For a $4 an hour job. Yeah, then there was no way I can make it to the university and to work and back without that truck. There just wasn't.
That seems like miracles pulling together that you got through it.
And yeah, it was really because one of my friends at school kind of saw me and he's like, what's wrong? And I told him, he's like, here, man, I got $10 for you. Just give me back whenever. And I remember thinking that $10, if I can get it all in the gas tank, that would last me like 2 or 3 days. Like, this is amazing. But then I remember thinking, I was like, I don't have a gas can. Like, I have to spend part of this $10
Yeah.
on a gas can. And now that 2 or 3 days worth of fuel is down to like maybe it gets me to work, you know?
You're not, yeah, it's expensive to be poor. It's
Yeah,
expensive
yeah,
to struggle. As soon as something goes wrong for you, everything triples in price. And
yeah, yeah. And that's, the lesson I learned from that is anytime I start a sentence with "Why don't you just," I immediately stop
right.
because some people say you have $10. Why don't you just put gas in your truck? It's like you're forgetting. I had zero cash. I was selling my own blood. I didn't have a gas can to transport the fuel. I had to buy one of those, and
Right.
then from that I got like 2 gallons, in the truck, and then from that I got to work, and so everything gets kind of shaved, like that full $10 wasn't $10 when it hits the tank.
And you
And
know,
that what was in the tank wasn't what was there when I got to work to get my tip out. And when I got my tip out, it was even less by the time I got to the fuel station. And then I'm home because I had to make an extra run, around the loop. So
that's how
it's
capitalism slowly kills. It chokes people directly to death, and just that iron grip. I've been saying capitalism kills forever, and poverty is expensive. And this is why we do. The whole reason we wanted to do this, so when we say solidarity through storytelling, is to think of how many people out there are experiencing this type of thing and think that it's because they did something wrong or because they're screwing it. And then we need to talk about this stuff more. That way we can all realize this is happening to people who are hardworking and trying to make good decisions. This is happening to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's true because people will say, if you want college money, go join the service. And it's like, okay, I was a big believer in that. I joined the service. Then you find out, well, all that college money doesn't pay for all the college if you move out of state. Well, okay, now I know that. And now you have to take out loans, and now you're paying those back.
While you're in service, right? They move you around.
Yeah, they do. They do. Especially in the Navy. Yeah, your deployments, stuff like that, you're gone for, sometimes I was gone, 8 months out of the year.
Mm-hmm. And as we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years, that being in person for things like a lot of jobs and for education is optional in a lot of places. So had we applied that information before, with out-of-state tuition seems like a superfluous idea at this point, that we can just log on to, like we're doing here, and take a course.
It really does. It really does. And, coming from my background, I had no idea such a thing existed. Somebody might say, well, why didn't you just research it some more? It's like, when you think you have all the answers, you eventually stop researching,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't afford, originally, when I graduated high school, I couldn't afford university studies. So I researched and found the GI Bill, and I got that taken care of. And I researched and I saw what the tuition was at the University of Texas in San Antonio. It's a commuter campus. And, and I researched and I figured out how I'm going to make the GI Bill, which pays me monthly, cover my tuition and, so on and so forth. But, and none of that did I ever learn about out-of-state tuition. And there was nobody there to tell me. And, at that point, you're already committed. You just sold 4 years of your life to a military. You're not stopping now. You're going to continue forward.
Yeah, you got a number now. So how long was it after you got out from the education part? You got your degree, right? How long was it that you stayed in America from there?
So I got out of the military in 2005. So July 2005. So August started my first year of university studies. And I was there for about 2.5 years before I kind of grew frustrated with the system and dropped out of school for the first time. Then I went back to working in aviation. I was working at San Antonio Aerospace, again, as an avionics technician, where I met the woman who would become my wife. And in meeting her, I wanted to try to do better so we can raise, a family comfortably and so on and so forth. Essentially, the contract work that I was doing at SAA, it allowed you to be employed 11 months out of the year, but that 12th month you had to take off. And it was a zero pay month. And so I knew that wasn't really conducive to raising a family comfortably. So I went back to the University of Texas for about a year before I dropped out the second time. Again, frustrated with the system. When you trade as much as I felt I had to go to the university studies, To go through the first couple of years was really frustrating because I really felt like I was learning the same math and the same history and the same English that I was doing in high school for free.
Yeah.
I really felt let down, and I thought the university studies would be more difficult, more challenging. I was doing an engineering degree, and after 2 years of coursework, I had yet to take an engineering class or do a lab or any of that. All of that came in year 3 and 4. So at this point in time, my experience, looking back, is like, why am I paying, $3,500 a semester? Why am I taking out loans? Why am I, taking my days off doing nothing but studying just to learn the same stuff? Columbus landed in 1492. These were the dates of, so on and so forth.
It sounds like it's timed conveniently so that your GI Bill aid would run off just about the time that you start getting to the interesting stuff that's relevant to you.
That's about right. Yeah. So this is, I have to say that this was the Montgomery GI Bill. I know the plan has changed somewhat, but yeah, even with my bonus at the 3rd year mark, at the end of the 3rd year, that was going to run dry, and I would have to take out loans or grants to finish off that last year. And that's the one that you're talking about, where you take the really, it's exciting, but it's also pretty nasty coursework. The math, the levels of math that are required is like a Cal 2 level when you're doing like signals and signal degradation, radiation, stuff like that. This is all electronic engineering. Yeah. So, yeah, 2009, though, I got a call from a family member of mine who worked with the company I work for now. She was in Seattle. And she said, they're branching out. They're opening a maintenance contract in Hungary, and they're having a really hard time finding technicians because this is the first time this company has taken a maintenance contract as opposed to building aircraft. They're moving into maintaining them. And also, nobody knows anything about Hungary. So would you be interested in going? And I said, well, hold on 1 second. I said, Sarah, there's an opportunity to go to Hungary. Do you want to go? And she's like, absolutely. And so
she just jumped
right in our application. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that like? You're jumping from one country to another. It's different than moving to Texas. You've already experienced what it's like to uproot yourself from one culture to another. You've been through culture shocks going from the city to the rural areas. But this is, we're talking new culture, new languages, new customs.
Yeah. So I don't know how to put this into perspective. The culture shock. Okay, here we go. I made mention that I was the most successful friend I had out of all my friends. I also made mention that across the street from the house I was born in is now resides the county jail. So my junior year, I had a friend who was dating an absolute knockout, just an absolute gorgeous girl in our class. And none of us could figure out how the heck this happened. The guy's name was Vinny and the girl's name was Jessica. And we would just ask him constantly, like, how the heck did you do this, man? Like, Vinny, like, I'm the best off out of the 3 of us, and my car is 3 different colors. None of you guys even have a car. Like, how in the heck did you get a 10, to even show any interest in you? And none of us could figure it out. And about 6 months into the relationship, he got word that she was breaking up with him. She had met somebody else. And, that was just kind of it for them. And we're like, dude, you can't take that lying down. Let's go, we're going to go mess this guy up. Like, you know who he is? Like, let's go, we got to go after him. And he's like, no, it's cool. His family is taking her to Spain on a vacation over the summer. And we're all like, oh, yeah, dude. Yeah, we can't compete with that. Like the idea that any of us would ever have a passport, yet alone be able to travel to Spain, yet alone bring, just somebody's girlfriend, out there. It's like, okay, yeah, we understand why she left you. Like, that's cool. So you take that mindset. And now I'm in Hungary and we're driving. It's wintertime. It's Christmas. It's our first day here. We were quite literally just handed keys to a vehicle with a GPS on it. And we're driving to our hotel and it starts snowing. And we get to our hotel and we look up on the hill and there's like the ruins of a castle. And inside the hotel is like all decorated for Christmas and the people there speak English. But we're just like, we get checked in, we drop our bags, we have our dogs with us. We had 2 dogs at the time and 2 cats. we leash them up and we walk up on this hill, and it's just like snow-covered, like paradise landscape. We're kicking around castle ruins with our dogs, like, and my wife and I are wondering, like, how in the heck did we end up kicking around a castle? Like, what are we doing? Like, it's
pretty out of body. So how long did it take you to find a home up there and settle in?
So we had assistance through the company. They hired somebody who would show us like 5 to 7 houses. We were settled in within a month by the time we got here. We spent Christmas in the hotel. We spent New Year's in the hotel. And then just after New Year's, we moved into our house. Our furniture was shipped overseas by the company as well, so we really got lucky with that. Got settled in, started adopting more dogs, started adopting more cats, had a kid like 3 years later, did a lot of sightseeing around Europe in between. But
oh, that's beautiful. I would love to do more of
that. I mean, you fly out here, man. We got a bed in the vehicle for you.
I might take you up on that. We less than worked so bad. So I want to fast forward a little bit here and ask you some questions here. Since you've lived in Hungary, when you look back at America, what is that perspective change now that you're living and having a chance to be in another area?
Man, so we lived in Hungary for 4 years, 2009 to 2013. And we decided, okay, that was fun. You know, we're having kids now. We want to move back to Tacoma, which is where we wanted to live. We bought a beautiful craftsman house, 100-year-old craftsman house in amazing condition for about $260,000. We saved enough to put like 60 grand down on it, so we only owed about 200. And I took a job as an avionics technician there. At that time, I hadn't completed my engineering degree yet. After a year and a half, we were absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable. Like, our kid would get sick, we would take him to the clinic, and even with our company's insurance, we'd be out almost $100 per visit. Yeah. Childcare was like running us ragged. We had one kid in, that was $1,000, and we had another one on the way, and we didn't know how we were going to come up with another $1,000, every month to pay for this. So my wife was at home, and it was driving her crazy. She was at home and she was doing the childcare to try to save us some money, and it was driving her crazy, never getting out of the house, never seeing another adult. Anything you do when you leave the house costs money, unless you go to the library, I guess.
And even
and so
then,
she couldn't really afford.
Have money.
What's that?
I said even then, some of them will chase you out. I've been in some libraries where they'll chase you out. You don't have any
No,
money.
I mean, it's true. It's true. It is a bit oversimplified to say it doesn't cost money. Yeah.
It absolutely. I understand what you're saying, though. It's
yeah.
Really, it's not a public park.
Yeah. So I mentioned that we stayed in Europe for 4 years and we saved $60,000. And, some of that was assistance from the company with the package that we moved out here on. But working for that same company back in the U.S., buying a house well under our price range for what we were qualified for. Like, we were qualified for like a $350,000 loan, and we only took $200 from the bank. With both of us working, 3 years in, we were about $16,000 in debt. And we were so miserable and so desperate to get out of the U.S. again. Yeah, we actually took a job in Kuwait for 2 years and moved out there.
Just to get out of here? You were that miserable?
Yeah. I mean, it's so insane. I don't know how to. It was like I felt trapped in the company I worked for, and I felt trapped because I felt like I was being held hostage through the medical benefits that they offered, and this became very evident when my brother came to me with some whiskey he had made at his house illegally. And it was like the best whiskey I'd ever stinking had in my entire life. I was like, my stinking God, if we put this in a bottle with a label, like, we could open a distillery. Like, you can do this again and again. And he could repeatedly make a good quality product. I was like, this is amazing. We need to find a place for you to set up a proper distillery. And what we found out when we started looking into it was we would need about $350,000 so we could operate at a loss for about 3 years and buy the equipment. But B, would have to clear some ridiculous amount of profit that two guys running a craft distillery could never make, just to pay for the medical insurance to cover me and my family.
Wow.
For him, it was no big deal. He was a single guy, no family whatsoever. But I got a wife and 2 kids, and I was the only one that had medical insurance, even though my wife worked for the state. And trying to pay for it on your own, it was like $1,700, almost $2,000 on top of the $2,000 in childcare, on top of the, clinic visits, on top of
Right.
you name it.
Right.
So, yeah.
You're really doing a great job at defining so many problems here, man. I have a hard time
Yeah.
to settle on.
Yeah, when I felt that boxed in, though, I really felt the need to lash out. And I didn't really know which direction I was, or how to lash out. I mean, how do you lash out against a corporation when you're inside of it? And so I never broke free of the corporation, but I did break free of the lifestyle that trapped me there. When I moved to Kuwait, the pay was good. It was a gigantic increase in pay. Nobody goes to Kuwait for the scenery. You always go for the paycheck. But being back on, for lack of a better term, universal health care was just such a weight off my chest that I felt like I could regroup myself. And luckily, the position in Hungary opened up as I had finished my degree at that point in time. And I was able to take an engineering job out here where, I'm not saying this place doesn't have its problems, but we do have healthcare. We pay into the Social Security system, and from that, you get a pension and healthcare. You also get free childcare. So first off, maternity or parental leave after a child is born is measured in years, up to 3, and it's paid.
Okay.
It starts at about 80% of your salary for the first year, and then it slowly drops to 50% by your 3rd year. But at 18 months, your child can go to the kindergartens here or the preschools, and that's free. And the teachers at the preschool make a teacher's salary. So it's not like you're getting somebody who, I know this isn't always the case, but you do attract people in the US who can't get a job anywhere else. So they do work at the preschool. But here you get people who went to school with this in mind. And so they're getting the job that they wanted. And it's a different quality of people. So just having that, lifting us up is just huge weight off of our chest, especially with having kids and whatnot.
I know that medical coverage, health insurance, healthcare coverage being a universal right for people, and in so many other places that Americans look down on. Like you said, Hungary has its own issues. I'm guessing that for a lot of Americans, they're going to just assume that the quality of life there is going to be lower than it is here. But already you're hearing that then people would think the same thing for Kuwait, right? But immediately we're seeing that the healthcare difference right there for the common people is a world of difference there in what you have access to.
Yeah, it really is. And, we talk about being free in America, but when you're held hostage by the healthcare, I don't think you really are. Like my brother was not free to start a craft distillery the way he would be out here because of that, because of that handicap of not having your healthcare. And, the other argument I hear is, if the government's running the healthcare, they're going to this and they're going to that. And, you forget that a private option is still available. And the private options, their prices are held, in check by what the government can offer for free. And we experienced this firsthand when our first son was born out here. We actually went through the private option healthcare at a medical, it was a hospital that people do elective plastic surgery at, to kind of give you an idea of, the level of care that's involved in this place, or the level of, it was equivalent to what we would expect in the US. And 5 days in the hospital, cesarean section for my wife, and I stayed with her the entire time. We also had a photographer, and we got a bottle of champagne when we left. But the whole thing cost us $1,200.
Yeah, that's a fraction. That's a fraction of what we pay in America for the same thing.
Yeah.
There's stories of people paying Leslie talked about how she was charged just to hold her child in America. So that's the type of story that you're not going to have that doesn't make sense.
She's right. She's right, because our second born was born in Tacoma at Tacoma General, and we were on the company's medical, and we were billed something. I mean, something similar, like $3,000, $4,000. But you look at what they charged the insurance, and it was something ridiculous. And the charges, oh man, the charges were insane. And people would come in at like every 30 to 45 minutes, 24 hours a day, pop in, and you would see it on the bill like, oh, clinic visit at 12:45 in the morning, $5,000. And you're like, what?
And literally, the mother's the one doing the work. So
yeah, she really is.
That's why that paid leave, that is exactly what that should be, because that is a labor that's done, and it's done for society too. If we're not having the opportunity to be home, raising our children, paying attention to them, if we don't have the ability to focus our energy on them because we're worried about something else, then what type of generation are we going to have the energy to raise? What type of parental leadership are we going to be able to provide for them if both parents need to be working and everybody is fully stressed out and angry by the end of the day and has no energy left to help with the next generation?
Yeah, so, that's really it. Yeah, really, I mean,
the parental leave is, and the ability to start them in the education for free at such an early age gives them a chance to socialize from a young age, gets them a chance to get ahead, and changes the entire attitude of how quickly you have to learn.
Yeah, no, it really does. And I'll never forget, because when we moved back to Tacoma and our second son was born in Tacoma General, my wife wanted to go back to work then, and we weren't sure we could afford it, but we did look into childcare facilities for our youngest. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being gutted as I saw the baby rockers lined up in a line, and one attendant would be in charge of, winding up the rockers and sticking a bottle in the mouth and, changing a diaper. Like, these children aren't being held, their mothers aren't there with them. Their mothers can't be there with them, And luckily, we were privileged enough that we could make it off of my single income, even though we were living paycheck to paycheck. We walked out of that childcare facility, went straight home and said, we're not talking about this again for 18 months. Like, there's no way I'm putting my kid in an institution that is going to do the bare minimum to keep a child alive. And I'm not going to pay thousands of dollars to have that happen. There's no way. Like, you can't beat a mother's care.
Yeah, you can't. That's absurd that that's even an option in when we call ourselves great. It's funny.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. And like I said, Europe, you pick any country in Europe and it's not without its problems. And, people will use that to justify, any number of things. But when it came time for us to choose for our family, there was never any question. When after a year and a half in Tacoma, we got a binder out. We call it Ice Cream Shop in Spain. And we created a 10-year plan to be out of debt and financially independent enough to move out of the US on our own and get to Hungary again, or somewhere in Europe again on our own, where we would take a job like working at an ice cream shop or something that had lower pay. But just to get us back on this lifestyle, especially for our children as they come of age and they're going to start having children and whatnot.
So when you get back out there to Hungary, right, what year was that?
So we got back out here 2019. So yeah,
pretty close to when the pandemic was about to strike.
Oh yeah, that dropped almost right after we got here. Yeah, we bought a house here that needed some serious refurbishment, and it's a long-term project. But that's another thing. Your property tax out here is paid once. It's 4% of what you purchase a house for. It's paid once. You never pay property tax again.
So you actually, once you own your land, it's actually yours.
It's yours. Yeah, my uncle has a house that's paid off in Auburn, Washington. It's a really nice house. It was bought for like $350,000 back in 2005, 2006-ish. So, big house. And he's already talking about when he's taxed out of his house, he will go live with my grandparents, in their cabin.
He will get taxed out because they keep on raising the property values so they can raise the tax rates on stuff that you've already completely paid for. Yeah, Americans are all even off their land. They're still just leasing it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, going back to your question, yeah, the pandemic dropped. We were in a rental at the time. We're still in a rental because our house isn't finished. Like I said, long-term project, but it doesn't cost us anything, to have the house, and it produces for us. There's like a lot of grapevines. We've got a really good garden going out there. So it benefits us to have that house and work on it brick by brick while we live in a rental. But yeah, the pandemic locked us down. The kids went remote school. At one point in time, I went remote work. And having the house became a lifesaver. My wife was undergoing cancer treatment at the time. And one of my office mates got COVID, and I was able to isolate, never having to see her again. I went straight to our new house and stayed there. Luckily, we had picked a lot of grapes that year. It was September we picked them. We turned it into wine. So about January, when I had to stay there, I had gallons of wine in the house. So, yeah. I had Wi-Fi, a sleeping bag, and wine.
So how vast was the difference in how the people of Hungary handled the COVID epidemic versus what you see? You heard stories from how we handled it in America, obviously, right?
Yeah. No, that was, there was some grumbling by some people who didn't want to isolate. But overall, people just did what was recommended by the professionals. People who could isolated, and people who could work from home, worked from home. The hospitals here really did a good job in sectioning off. If you weren't needed in the hospital, you weren't going in the hospital. I mentioned my wife was undergoing cancer treatment, so we got to visit her while she was in the hospital when she was there. And she was able to receive treatment the whole time. But, somebody who might have had like a minor issue, common cold, could talk to their GP through, like we're doing right now. The GP would type in the prescriptions that they needed, through their social security number. That person could skip the hospital altogether, go straight to the pharmacist and pick up what they needed to really cut down on traffic in those areas. We did at-risk people hours in the grocery stores, usually during the day. So from like 9 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock p.m., it was elderly or disabled only. Like they would not let you in the stores. Let's see, what else?
That doesn't sound like that disrupted your entire world, though, did it?
I'm not gonna say it wasn't stressful being locked in my house with my kids, but no, I mean it didn't disrupt anything. I was still able to work. My wife was still able to get the care she needed. The kids were still able to go to school. And as parents, we tried to find things for our kids to do, like activities for them to do.
Right.
Luckily for us, we had a third of an acre garden for them to run around. And my wife, being more at risk, had to try to avoid people altogether. So, on that sense, I have a 4-wheel drive Toyota, and I knew some 4-wheel drive trails nearby. So we would just go out there, leave civilization behind, and just kick around the fields, check out deer stands, pick berries, that sort of thing. What else did we do? I mean, just a lot of stuff like that.
All right. Well, we've spent a long time building up to this part. I want to get up to where we are now, though, because right now what you're doing is, I think, what we need more people to hear about. We've got I love everybody. You get such a versatile conversation here because everybody gets to hear a little bit of something about growing up in America, about living in other countries, about serving in the military. There's a lot of different topics that we're able to go over because you've got such an amazing, interesting life.
Thanks.
Your neighboring nation, Ukraine, gets invaded by Russia.
Yeah.
And people are getting shelled. Invading, occupying forces are coming into people's neighborhoods and driving through their towns. And there you are, sitting in close proximity to them in Hungary. So how do you get together you work with a group called Vans Without Borders?
So the way this works, so it started with refugees that were coming across the border. Actually, this right here next to me was given to me by the mayor of a neighboring village. I helped set up a refugee shelter. The village had 120 people in it, and he was setting up a shelter for about 45 refugees coming in. That's how this started. And then refugees came to my town. My town is about 30,000 people. We got about another 40 to 45. And I just started grabbing like any donation I could and throwing it in the back. I have a 1989 Toyota 4Runner. It's a first generation, if anybody's familiar with the model. But it actually ends up being perfect for what I'm doing because it's just square back there and I can just load it with donations. And so we started that, and the invasion's happening. There's fighting happening in Kyiv. And I was entered in an African charity rally, and I got in contact with the organizer who wanted to help Ukraine. I was like, give me a list of medical supplies that Ukraine needs, and we'll try to get it in. And so he gave me the list, and I was like, all right, I can get it to you. Where can you get it? He's like, well, if you get it to me, I'll get it into country. And then from there, we have another member that can take it as close to Kyiv as he can get. And I mean, this just kind of snowballed. Mm-hmm. So me personally, I'm a self-funded driver of humanitarian aid. You mentioned Vans Without Borders, and these are like another grassroots group of efforts that I try to help out. So we are two different sections of one big operation. So I operate out of country, and I drive 24 hours into Dnipro, Ukraine. And in Dnipro, I have 57 children that we've been helping since April of last year. Before that, I was running medical supplies that turned into children's hospitals, and now that's turned into children. And Vans Without Borders, they operate from Dnipro to the front, and they are like a combination. You mentioned the villages are getting shelled. There's still women and old men and people who can't leave those areas. They're still living there, and that's what these guys do. Is they visit. They bring anything they can, food, water, sanitary needs, that sort of thing. And they also help out the military. Maybe they bring laptops, whatever they can get their hands on. So some of that gets pretty scarce out on the front. So I contact them. What do you need from out of country that I can bring in? And then they can take that, further on. I always say, an empty vehicle doesn't do anybody any good. 57 children is a lot, but if I pack intelligently, I can make that fit in my truck, and I try to use any spare space I can. So I contact Vans Without Borders. There's a few other organizations, like there's a Ukrainian school in Budapest. I try to help out on my return trip. So if I'm in Ukraine and I'm dropping stuff off, I try to find something in Ukraine that these children might need for their school back in Budapest. So on my return run, I'm not empty. And yeah, I mean, it's all just a constant network of,
put that together. That is insane.
Yeah, you just touch on any node you think will give you a response, and sometimes you get one and sometimes you don't. I mean, there are a few people I've helped out in the past that I'm no longer in touch with as they've moved on to other areas in Ukraine that I just can't get to. I've met a lot of friends. I can see you put pickup for Ukraine there. I have a friend who's an absolute wonderful person. She's made 4 drives in. These people buy trucks for Ukrainian military. And she has the same philosophy. An empty truck does nobody any good. So they fill the beds of the pickups with medical supplies and drop them off anywhere they need along the way. And they drive it all the way into Kyiv. So, it's all about maximizing effort.
It's great. I hope anybody who needs that link will be free we will provide that going forward. Anybody who doesn't manage to get it here from where we've got it on the screen. But if anybody wants to make their own donations, open your pocketbooks up and help these guys out, because this is not a cheap, like you said, you're personally funding a lot of the work that you do. I know it takes a big toll on your vehicle, because I've seen some videos that you've posted about, or some of the stories that you've shared about the truck takes.
Yeah, before the Christmas run, I had the engine torn in half to get at the head gasket, and
this is a lot of work. This is a huge commitment, and I'm sure that this is making a huge difference for people's lives who are going through a miserable effort right now. So we're running out of time here before the StreamYard reaches its maximum length. So I'm going to have to wrap everything up here. Get back together again and do a part 2 maybe sometime soon, because I know there's.
I would absolutely love it. I mean, like you said, there's a lot that I could share, or at least I could feel I could share. If you're interested, would be absolutely happy to do a part 2.
I would love to. All right. It's been great talking to you this morning. It really has.
You too, man. You too.
Wish
And
I
like
could.
I said, if you get out here, I got a car and a place for you to sleep, man. As long as you don't mind the dogs or the children.
Yeah, well, if I can make that happen, I might do that.
All right.
Looking forward to talking to you again, my man. I appreciate you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, man. Cheers.
Solidarity through storytelling. Thank you very much for visiting us today. We'll be back again with Go Ask Your Folks again with our next guest. Appreciate you.
All right.
I was once an American kid, growing up on hollowed ground. Rode to the river on a pretty red horse in a pretty little country town. But I grew up fast and I cast my vote